Reza!
Hello.
We're together again. You've been traveling, and now you have come up with another topic.
I'm back in the studio.
In the studio. I like that. And this one is something that's near and dear to your heart, right? So why don't you tell me what it is, and then let's begin.
I've been wanting to interview you about this for a while, and it's basically on writing, on your practice, okay? You're a filmmaker, a journo, but you write books, and that's always been an interesting topic to me because I find books are very hard to write. I mean, they take a lot of time, they take a lot of research. I got my degree in journalism, and I could never be a writer. I would spend days on a little 500-word article. So I transitioned. I became a photographer.
And a good photographer.
A photographer and a filmmaker. But I've always been curious, and I've always admired writers and their process. So let's get to it. The first question I wanted to ask you was about your process. And when you first started going to these conflict zones and dangerous places, how did you develop your process, turn your experience into narrative?
Well, I have no education, so let's just start with that, right? But I did read books when I was very young. As a matter of fact, I was very quick to pick up reading. And my first book I read was the Odyssey by Homer when I was in grade 1, and I was 6 years old. And I didn't understand all the words, but I understood that this book was taking me on a journey, right? So I was fascinated by that. And then I began reading the Hardy Boys books, and I noticed there was a structure, and I kind of felt like, okay, you start here, something happens, and then they get into it, they fix it, resolution, on to the next one, right? So I think I had an inherent sense of how books are structured. Fast forward, when I was 17, I was a copywriter, so I had a natural proclivity for English, meaning that I understood that English was not just a language, it was like a feast of words, of different ways of putting them together and maybe inventing new words or using foreign words or, so I had a facility with language. And when you're a copywriter, you only have to write like 10 words, right? Like some kind of tricky headline or some kind of alliteration or something. So I spent a lot of time crafting it's like putting bricks together, right? Like this one goes in front, no, I'll put that one there, I'll try this. And it becomes more of like arranging stones or something, balancing stones, and you know when you have it, right? But then you have to do more than that. You have to do like 5 of them because the client's going to go, nah, don't like it. So you get used to not only the facility of crafting language, but also the disposal of all your hard work in like 30 seconds, and you have to go back and do it again. So you're not writing for you, you're writing for someone else. So that's the other lesson you learn. And when I began to do my adventures, I took notes. I had like little plastic diaries and stuff, but only because I would forget something, right? And I didn't really have any sense of structure. And these diaries still sit in a box, and tells me what I ate, how much I paid for a beer, some guy's name or phone number, just really mundane things. So it wasn't until the Camel Trophy happened in 1991. I was a Land Rover fan. I always wanted to go on the Camel Trophy or expeditions. And I said I would be a journalist because I couldn't qualify as a team member, even though I'd done more off-roading in Land Rovers than the people who were actually chosen for the team, right? So I was a ringer. So they put me in there, but I had to write a story about it. So I was very concerned, because I had to take very careful notes, and I had to take pictures too. So I think the event lasts for 2 weeks, something like that. And I covered the training, I covered the event, and what I noticed is that when I took a picture, there was like a wealth of information in the photo. So I learned to balance, like where are we? Oh, we're here, and how far did we drive? And somebody said something kind of creative. I didn't shoot video then. So I wrote this article called "In the Footsteps of the Great Explorers," and it's very visual because all I can write about is what I see or what I hear. So,
was this your first article?
Yeah, it's my first article. The first time I'd written a commercial magazine, anything, right? And so I sent it out And of course, I was a nobody, and they all looked at me like, why would we run this, Camel Trophy, that's a commercial event. And there was one magazine that's like, oh, this is great. It's like Soldier of Fortune, right? So Soldier of Fortune, which is probably known for the world's worst writing, but picked it up. And then a few other magazines picked it up, but nothing, spectacular. But at least I had achieved my goal of writing an article. And I then got into the business of marketing. And so you end up creating annual reports, video scripts. And, I'd done something called the Great Toronto Adventure, which was an hour-long thing, which required a script and narrative storytelling that worked with images. And sometimes the images would take the story, and sometimes the words would tell a story, and sometimes they contrasted or whatever. So I just inherently got into that. Now, my first book was really looking at other books when I bought Fielding Worldwide, which was a travel publisher that had about, maybe 20 books, something like that. And each one was about a place. So, France, Europe, whatever, Spain. And I would look at these books and I'm like, oh my God, they're so terrible because they're half directory information and half sort of descriptive things. And I then began working on restructuring those by creating a database to collect facts and then creating spaces to create the visual picture. Now, this sounds like, why didn't you just go to school and learn how to write, right? But it was always had a utility to it, right? There's always somebody paying for it and always had some purpose. So I always wanted to write a book about places that are really hard to get into, places that are really dangerous. But I couldn't write that sort of database stuff because there was no hotel, there was no train to catch, there was nothing sort of fixed that you could rely on, like phone numbers or whatever. So I began to write down my experiences in almost like the naive sense of experiencing them for the first time. And I just, we have 5 senses, right? So you smell, color, heat, whatever. And I would incorporate that. And then I would then let people talk to me and I'd write down what they said. And then this together was sort of a you are there kind of narrative. I wouldn't say it's like Hemingway, like, the trees sprung out of the ground, like blah, blah. No, it wasn't like that at all. So it was very plain and simple. And I always believe that you should write as little as possible. So my book ended up being 1,000 pages. But it did very, very well because I think it balanced factual material, which was left out of the prose, and the prose, which described events and places and things that you could absorb emotionally.
Yeah, well, you use a lot of humor and irony in your books and in your writing style.
Funny. So the first time I wrote The World's Most Dangerous Places, I said, this is very serious stuff. I better just start at the beginning. And I thought, it's like, nobody's going to read this because it's just so matter of fact. It does not in any way capture the sense of violence and fear and just intensity of conflict zones.
Did you send it out and get feedback, or was that a realization you came on your own?
No, I'm my own worst critic, right? And I write very fast, and sometimes I get lazy, and I just crank things out. And when you sit down and read it, you suddenly go, I wouldn't pay money for this. So I sat down and I wrote it sort of in the way I talked, in what they call your voice, right? And I have a certain voice. I don't know what it is. I just know that when I'm in my groove, I'm writing, words come out, and I get to the end and I'm done, right? So it's I'll explain, like there's one weird thing about writing is I go into a trance. So when I start writing, I can start at 8 o'clock in the morning and I can look up and it'll be 5 o'clock. And literally I haven't moved out of my chair. And so there is sort of it's called hyper-focus or something like that. There is something where you start writing and it's like a trance, like, yeah, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it because it's like I'm creating something and I'm communicating to somebody. And
Dangerous Places is an interesting one because it has a lot of facts, figures, statistics in it. And when you write, are you just like throwing up on a page and then later you're entering all that stuff in? Or like you said, it's kind of like you structured it and then you went back?
The biggest problem with going to very dangerous places is the bullshit factor. It's very easy to exaggerate the danger or the intensity of something. So if you haven't been anywhere, everything's intense. Like, your plane hits a bump and you go, oh, like, you could probably write a story about that. But there's a level of intensity that you have to preserve, right? So that's my main focus, is to keep just like when you do a soundtrack on a movie and the explosions are loud and the talking is soft. So that's one thing I look for. Second thing,
Keep your reader in mind, right? Because it's like you can become.
so structure. So I can't just write. I can't just like get on a plane, start writing, and then when I get home, stop writing, and then you have to read 50,000 pages of my trip. You have to cut. You have to literally look at what's important. And more importantly, the less you write, the more powerful your writing is. I mean, ideally, if I could write a haiku, after a 6-month trip, that would be like perfection. But you end up saying, okay, what do people need to know? What is the singular moment in that trip that kind of defines that place? And I think that's what people liked about it, is I wasn't just like, when I got off the train, I was hungry and some guy was kidnapped here last week, so it was really dangerous. Like, I don't do that. I just literally talk about the thing that I remember. So, and then I leave the heavy lifting for like factual stuff. I don't need to put statistics in my narrative. It's all in the other stuff. So.
You've written a lot of books. You've written over 10 books, and what's the difference between and in between that you're writing a lot of articles? I don't know if people know that, but you've written a lot of articles. And what's the difference between an article and a book?
Well, there's a big difference. So most people that are writers don't write books. That's kind of like up there. I started with writing a best-selling book.
My next guest tonight is the author of the best-selling travel guidebook called Fielding's The World's Most Dangerous Places. Please welcome Robert Young Pelton. This is we were looking through this book earlier today. This is a fascinating book. You list all these places that are incredibly dangerous, and you've gone to pretty much all of them.
That's my job now, to visit these places. Yeah?
You go there and you visit these places that a lot of them, they're advisories. People should not go there. What is the most dangerous place? Is there one place that you really would not want to go?
I used to say Algeria because the GIA, which is a terrorist group, used to send me faxes saying, come to Algeria, we'll cut your throat. And that's how it would.
What, they would send you faxes that say we will cut your throat?
Yeah, they don't like journalists, Westerners.
How did they get your fax number? Did you give it to them? Like, if you ever need to threaten me, it's better by fax. Here's the number.
Yeah. Don't send packages, though.
Yeah.
No, most people know the book. They know who we are, and they know how to reach us. But I said I wouldn't go there, and all of a sudden I thought to myself, well, how can you write a book about the world's most dangerous place and not go there? So I went there about a month and a half ago, and it was an interesting experience.
So it's like I started with the New York Times best-selling book, and then I decided, because my agent yelled at me, that I should write articles.
And let's clarify, it was the world's most dangerous places.
Yeah, so my first book was The World's Most Dangerous Places, and like 100,000 copies out the gate, before the first year was over. So, it's funny to go talk to a magazine guy, and he goes, well, okay, so what's your idea? Pitch me, right? And I'm like, with a sense of ego, like, well, basically anything I do, you should be interested in, right? Because I had a TV series that was the deal. Is anywhere I go, they have to run whatever I film. But I was very careful about where I went.
And Robert Pelton doesn't like our chances if the U.S. invaded Afghanistan either.
It's the last place in the world you want to fight a war. And it was a 500-pound bomb.
Pelton knows what he's talking about because this real-life Indiana Jones has entered Afghanistan covertly 4 times in the course of his work as an author and documentary filmmaker.
In terms of it had to be intense, right? So when I go to the magazine, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can double dip. I can write about a show that I'm doing, and that would be an article. And they're like, no, you can't. You can't. They want that to be unique, so it's fine. So I would pitch them on ideas, and there's this weird level of like risk, like that's too dangerous. We don't want to be responsible for you getting killed just because you think that's a great story. And I'm like, okay, but it says adventure on the cover. And so I didn't realize at the time, but there's a whole culture of magazines, or there was anyways, is service articles. Like, this guy advertises his backpack, so we got to talk about it over here, like match up the advertising with the articles with the reader. Well, I'm talking about hanging off the side of a train in Tajikistan, wearing like a 10-year-old military bag. There's nothing for me to sell. Like, my boots aren't cool. My shirt's not cool. I'm not lecturing people about, any kind of exercise or, so I was just sort of an anomaly. But I did these articles. They pay you anywhere between $1 and $2 a word. If you're lucky, you get your expenses reimbursed, but they bust your balls over those. And they're not in sync with the world, right? So if you say, I need to go to Ukraine because the Russians are going to invade next week, they're like, God, we're just really full up, maybe in a couple months hit us up. And there's that sense of like, we're in art. You write for the sake of writing, and it doesn't really matter the intensity or the timeliness. When you write a book, you have to write a big proposal. You have to write a sample chapter. You have to talk about why this book is important, who's going to read it, how you're going to market it. And they're going to give you $100,000 to $200,000 as an advance, hoping that they can sell 20, 30, 40,000 copies when it comes out 2 years later. So it's a much different business arrangement. They also look at your market, like, well, how many people know this guy, or how many people would we logically expect to buy this book? So I never used that when I wrote my books. It just was like I would write things, and my publisher would be like, oh my God, like I was hired to write my autobiography. And I wrote it in snippets, in like little snapshots, like literally descriptions of photographs, even though they weren't photographs. And it wasn't linear. And it was like, oh my God.
The adventures,
Yeah.
And people who are adventurers get it. They like the
I really enjoyed that book. Yeah.
But people who start like, I was a small black child born in a poor neighborhood, and I did, like, they want that kind of thing. And
Yours is like a little like snapshot of all these different places and travels.
in my mind, I wrote down the most intense things in my life. Now, that book only covers up to 2000, right? So it's actually the boring part of my life. But this was very conscious. And then these experiences come together and become linear at the end, right? So anyway, bottom line is that you have to understand the marketplace, as I was saying. And a lot of people, they want to sit down and they want to read a book, an autobiography that starts here, takes you to there, gives you a scoop on something. You need a couple of selling points. So when you go out to the media, you go, scoop, never knew this. I'm going to tell you all about this. But I never had the time to promote my books. I was always traveling. And so I didn't do like the official, like, promote the book. But anyway, so then your book has to sell. If your book doesn't sell, they kind of go, I don't know if we can give you a lot of money on the next one. We might, it's like being a rock star. Like, they literally look at your record sales, and you have to promote them on tour. And if you don't do a good job, you just shrink, right? And that's changed now, of course. That's the old way. But if you want to be a magazine writer, you should also live in New York. You should be part of the cultural scene, right? And I was never part of the cultural scene. If you want to be a book writer, you really have to be a good writer. Like, they expect you to be a high quality writer, and they expect you to deliver your book because they got a slot for you. And if you don't deliver your book on time, then they don't want to do business with you. So there's different requirements.
Is it like you can just throw up on a page and then you can have an editor kind of edit for you? Or is it?
It's changed. So promotion sells books. You see people with their Twitter or X sites, and they got their book on top, and you think, that guy wrote a book,
Before I move on to my next question, what's some of the magazines that you've worked for?
So I wrote for National Geographic Adventure. I did a column for them for almost 10 years. I wrote for hoity-toity things like Foreign Policy, Virginia Quarterly Review, Men's Journal.
Very heavy and dense, like Foreign Policy. And
I chose very few magazines to write for because I don't want to be in Reader's Digest or whatever. They can interview me, but I wanted to be part of, like, Men's Journal is a great magazine. It had a lot of great writers, really interesting stuff, very high quality. National Geographic Adventure was great. Outside Magazine, I can't even remember I've written for. I've been in Outside Magazine for years, and they keep writing about me, and I'm thinking, wait, you guys never paid me to actually write an article. Or maybe I did, I can't remember. So I also wrote for a thing called Blue Magazine, which was a very creative. David Carson was the art director, very famous guy, and they dove into sort of the world of adventure travel, and so I did maybe 7 or 8 articles for them. I also wrote for Vice Magazine. I wrote an entire edition of Vice Magazine.
Not only did you write, but you also photographed and you filmed a whole documentary.
My point is, magazines is not about the writing, it's about the culture and the people and Why do you want to be in this magazine versus that magazine? Books are about having an editor and a publisher who really like what you do and want to promote you, but you have to be a book writer. You have to promote your books mercilessly. Doing documentaries is a whole other world, not even related to books or magazines, right? And you've got to go to all these festivals. I can't do that, right? So these are cultural pools of people, and it's very rare that you skip from one to the other. I mean, it's extremely rare that I would be working for CBS 60 Minutes, ABC Investigated, CNN, Discovery, all these people are they're all competitors. And you're supposed to be like theirs, right? And they're supposed to keep you employed. But I was like, I'm going to work for everybody. I mean, I'm not going to mess them up by doing two things at one time.
Get stuck in a box. That's just not your MO.
I'm the brand, right? That's what I learned very early on. When ABC News was the very first thing, they did an internet series in which I was the first solo journalist, and I traveled around the world, and they were making a documentary about me. But I was writing, photographing, filming, and then uploading these stories from like Sudan, Bougainville, Afghanistan. And I realized very quickly, yes, they have a nice platform, but I'm what people are reading. So if I shift over to CNN, I take those people with me. I don't need to live at CNN. I don't need to live at CBS. And okay, fine, I don't get paid $20 million a year to sit and do a morning show. But the point was that if I want to do what I want to do, I had to do it. And then I had to sell it, or at least pitch it to the different areas, whether it be documentary or magazines.
I got to think that that's important for a writer and for their voice.
Not for writers, it's important for as a human being. I don't want to be pigeonholed as like the crazy guy who does this stuff, right?
That's what happens to a lot of writers, don't they? They just get pigeonholed into their thing.
I mean, like Hunter Thompson and Rolling Stone and
Okay, I kind of want to go there. So, like, I know you don't like this comparison, but I compare you a lot to a gonzo journalist because your books feel very lived in. And so you're always participating in the action and what's going on, and you're immersed in the story. How does that influence your style?
So something really important. You can write a story about the Hells Angels, or you can be a Hells Angel and write a story, right? Mm-hmm. Hunter S. Thompson came to fame because he hung out with Sonny Barger and the Hells Angels, and he kind of gussied up the story a little bit to make it sound more dramatic, and they stomped the shit out of him, right?
The bike rider is Cliff Workman, treasurer of the Hells Angels, the wildest bunch of outlaws to come out of the West since Billy the Kid and the Dalton. He's here to challenge his biographer, a tense young literary journalist named Hunter Thompson. It was Thompson who lived, drank, and rode with the Hells Angels and wrote about them in a bestseller. He was the first to compare them to the outlaws of the West. The critics have been unanimous in their praise of his book, but the Hells Angels haven't been heard from yet. Tonight, Sunday makes author meet critic. It brings together the writer Hunter Thompson and the reader he antagonized the most. That's the bike rider, Hells Angel, Cliff Workman.
What did you think of the book?
Well, I'll tell you, Al and Hunter, everybody in this room, that book is 60% cheap trash.
But he's a writer that needs a good subject. I don't need that. I go do things that are intrinsically interesting with people, and I don't necessarily want to play it up or to have some affiliation with a magazine that might have a political leaning or a certain editorial style. I want to do my thing. And then if nobody wants to buy it, I'm completely happy with that because I did it. So I'm not a writer first. I'm me first. And then from that comes photographs, writing, documentaries, lectures, whatever. That's the difference.
When you come back from the field, how do you organize just the chaos of all this stuff? Because I've been with you some places, and it's just, there's a million things happening. And how do you organize that in a coherent story?
Okay, so it's terrible because like when I went to Borneo, I had large format 6x17 Fuji. I had a digital recorder. I had my Leicas, and I had video. I think it was High 8 or something like that. And I came back with just mountains of stuff, mountains and mountains of stuff. And it was just so overwhelming, I never did anything with it, right? I ended up writing a book, doing X number of expeditions over 3 or 4 years. But I have never actually published those images. And when people see them, they go, you carried a 6x17, 2¼ by, like pictures are this big, right? Through the jungle, down the rivers. And yeah, it was a bitch and a half because I had to keep it dry all the time, and it's got a shutter.
Destroyed. I mean,
Amazing. And I shot them on Fuji 50. If you know anything about film, Velvia is like the most intense, rich, transparency film. I did like an album of music using recordings of like Headhunters and stuff like this on this album that I did with this guy. And I wrote a book.
you were writing, were you, what were you relying on? Do you have a photographic memory? Or are you,
Of course. I'm a photographer. I can describe almost every picture I ever took, right? But that's not the point. The point is that I try to document as many things as I can while I'm doing that without actually taking away from the experience. That's the balance, right? So when you're canoeing down a rapid, you don't have time to film. Like, you really just have to remember what the hell's going on. You may not remember that event correctly because you might not have seen that guy over here, or you may not remember that you hit this rock instead of that rock, whatever. But the photographs bring everything back, and I can sort of reconstruct it.
big deal, yeah. And do you journal at the end of the day? Are you journaling? Like,
I used to carry a Scion, Psion. I used to have this little. It was powered by batteries, but it had almost a full-size keyboard. And I used to type with my thumbs furiously. And then when I got arrested, I would hide the little memory card, in some place. And I think I started using my phone. I had a BlackBerry. That was my major note-taking tool. And right now I use an iPhone, right? And I don't like it because my thumbs are too big and whatever, but I can usually write at that time and I can capture what's important. But that's not what writing's about. Writing's about like the whole of it, right? Like putting it all together. And I could probably do like a Twitter expedition, right? Where you send a tweet every 5 minutes, but there's no structure to that.
yeah. Okay, so when you're gonna write, what's your ideal writing environment like?
I bought a ranch in North San Diego County, which was in the middle of nowhere. It's old, I wouldn't say abandoned, but it was an older, like 60s building. And I would come down, and all I heard was coyotes in the evening and birds during the day, and I would get up in my bathrobe and I would sit on the couch. It was a terrible thing to do, and just start writing. And like I said, I would look up 6-8 hours later, and it was like, whoa, and I'd be exhausted. My eyes would be all blurry. I'd go for a swim,
And just because I know you wake up extremely early. What time? Yeah, what time do you wake up? And
normally I wake up at 4. So the reason I get up at 4 is that's like the killing time, right? Like when you ambush people, you ambush in between 3 or 4. That's when everything is at its most quiet. And all my life, I've had like the reverse cycle where I get up around 4, and then I have an hour before, maybe 2 hours before the sun comes up. And I really like that period of time because everything's dead, everything's quiet. And then when the sun comes up, other people get up and they start doing their thing. And then I've already put in, 4 hours of work by then. And then I have a breakfast, and then I do my second thing, which is usually lighter, not so intense. And then about, 2 o'clock, I might take a break, and then I'll work till about 6. And then I'll just turn my brain off and go to bed like 9 o'clock, something like that, 9:30. But it's just how you're built. Like when I was a kid, I used to sleep outside my sleeping bag, and I would wake up at like 3:30, 4 in the morning. I'd make a fire and get everything ready. And it was like people thought I was insane, but I was like, well, that's the most practical thing to do at that time of night instead of sleeping. So
I gotta think it's a good habit for writing, and you have no one to bother you. No stresses.
like this is old guy stuff, but today people stay up till like 2 or 3 in the morning. Like, do you notice there's a shift where they got like Navy SEALs like, oh, you got to get up at 4 and do this. Like, no, if you don't get up at 4, don't get up at 4. It's not fun if you have to get up at 4, right? If you choose to get up at 4, just use that time appropriately. Use the quiet and the focus to do the things that need quiet and focus, right? But if you get up at 8:30 and you got things to do and the phone's ringing and people are yelling at you and there's noise, like you can never pick that time. I used to write on the plane. Remember, I had a business when I first started writing. So I would steal time away in the morning when I was flying, like waiting at airports. That's how I wrote that book, Most Dangerous Places.
How long does it take you to write?
I write memos that are like 2,000 words, so I have no problem writing like I talk, right? Like thank God I took typing in high school, because I just like let it rip. I wear out the keys on my Mac. But it's also the rewriting, right? You can just have a great moment where you're telling a story, but you got to go back and go, okay, tighten, and rewrite. Yeah, it's writing's hard work. It's very lonely work because you're by yourself. You're watching the sun come up and go down when you think I should be going for a walk with my dog. I should be, fixing this or doing that. Your phone is ringing all day long, and they're like, "What the hell is Pelton doing?" But you can't break focus, and then when you're done writing, nobody wants to talk to you because they figure you don't like them because you never answered their calls or whatever. And then when you travel a lot, you're just completely out of the loop. So there's a sense of solitude, right? And when you do these interviews, like when you do a publicity tour, that's something you did like 2 years ago. Like you could care less about, why did you write this book about mercenaries? It's like, well, I did that a year ago. I can't remember. I'm doing this now. So it's a strange life.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about the drafting and the rewriting, and how many drafts do you use?
You need to know what the book is, right? So you got to start with like A to Z, and then you got to say, where am I taking people? And there's a typical structure to a book, but start here, tell this story, end up here, get out there, right? Now, my books tend to be long, so I said, well, let's also throw in the history of Africa while we're doing that, right? Like instead of just telling the story, tell relevant things that add depth to what you're doing. And then do a chapter outline. Pick the chapter that you like the most or you think is the most important, and then just hammer that one to get the tone, and then go back and start filling in the blank spaces, right? But the problem is that writing is like, you start writing and you just go, woo, and you end up in places you never even thought you'd end up. Like when I wrote the fiction book, Raven, right? I wrote my first fictional book. It was really hard because I had to remember everything. Because I'm creating a fictional environment. I got a fictional person. I got to remember if he ate an hour earlier and whether it was raining, and and then I got to put that down, pick it up the next day and go, oh God, was it raining? I forget, I find fiction incredibly hard to write, whereas I have no shortage of stories based on what I did. So it's easy for me to write. It's easier for me to tighten it up, and then I leave it alone. That's really the key, right? Go do something completely different for a week, just like ignore it. Come back and go, oh, fuck, this needs to be rewritten entirely. And then start again, right? And so my point is that it's like carving and carving away until everything that isn't your book gets chipped away, right? Yeah. I mean, it's hard to explain, but and people say, well, I don't know how to write. How should I write? Well, do something interesting. Like find somebody interesting. Like find something that's really, and it's easy to write because you have to explain that thing, whatever that thing is. So.
Yeah. Do you find it important that you have to, like you hear a lot that you have to write what you know and what you live?
You talk like you literally have to be the person you're writing about. Now, I'm not a real writer. Like I'm not like somebody that went to college and wrote fictional books and has a series of this and that, but I don't know how you could write about things you know nothing about. You'd have to do all this research, but the research just means you're a fake. Right? So.
But there's a lot of writers that they write from outside perspectives, and like when you wrote your book License to Kill, it's a very different. A lot of writers are writing about PMCs at that time, but it's a very different. It is a very different book. they're talking about secondhand, third-hand, fourth-hand accounts.
Yeah, so there are three kinds of books. There was books written by people who didn't like PMCs or mercenaries. Like, I won't say left-wing, but I mean, like these people are terrible, right? Mm-hmm. Which was the popular view. Then there were people who actually were PMC guys or security guys, and they write, with their knuckles, and they write these books like, holy shit, there I was. And then there's people like me who said, no, in order to understand these people, you have to meet this person, this person, this person, and this person. And once you have the entire spectrum of people who kill people for a living, you can judge. But you have to hear it from them. I mean, you have to sit with them and drink beer and talk. And so I went all the way back with the old CIA guys like Billy Waugh, went through the whole creation of the PMC world, or the PSD world, which is basically private security details for like generals like Schwarzkopf, Delta Force guys, plain clothes, all those guys with the cool glasses that you see in the movie, like in Sicario, like all these guys. And I went forward into Blackwater, and then I went to all the main PMCs, like Triple Canopy. I went to Hart, English, American, Delta Force guys, Navy SEAL guys. And then I wrote Irish for a month every day.
A lot of time and energy, and this is years.
And halfway through the book, and then I end up with all the actual mercenaries, the South African mercenaries. So I live with them, and I get inculcated into their whole culture from the very top, from the executives, from the accountant, all the way down to the knuckle draggers, to the guys in prison in Equatorial Guinea. I go meet with President Obiang to get my friend out of jail, and then I end up sort of back where I started, and I'm trying to explain to people that this is a very, very dangerous thing. Now, remember, this is 2007, and what I end up doing is explaining that, yes, it's convenient to use mercenaries and PMCs now, but what if those people don't need you? They basically self-finance themselves like they did during the East India Company, a place like that. And I said, we need to approach this with a very serious view of, much like people view AI. Like, what if AI just goes off and does its own thing? What if these mercenaries just go off and do their own thing? And right now, if you go to Sudan, you go to Gaza, you go to DRC, you see mercenaries. You see Ukraine, you see mercenaries. And they're not all the same, like rubber stamp mercenaries. We have American mercenaries working for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation inside Gaza. We have volunteers in Ukraine from all over the world, also America. We got all kinds of weird permutations of mercenaries down in Sudan. We got Colombians, we got South Africans, whatever. And these are taking the control of warfare out of our hands, right? So that book, if anything, is almost like a thesis. Like, this is what they are, except I'm not smart enough to do it in the library. I have to actually be in the vehicles, on the front lines, drinking, hanging out with these people to absorb that. And the criticism I get is that the guy's like, I don't see his sources. He didn't cite any sources. And I'm like, I'm there. Literally getting shot at with these guys. Like, why do I need to cite the source? It's literally me. And again, Jeremy Scahill wrote a book about Blackwater, and it's all got thousands of sites at the end. And that book sold a lot more because it made a political point. It's like, we don't like these people. But it didn't actually go into the reason for needing those people. It was like a slightly distant observation. So my books are never distant. They're never like, you're literally in the shit when you read my book. So
yeah, License to Kill is interesting because it's very objective, but then there is a takeaway at the end without it being too political.
That I got these guys on the record, like Billy Waugh, like people like that. Yeah, later people discovered Billy Waugh and they wrote about him, but it took a lot to get people to trust me and then to sit with me and tell me the truth about what they do.
It's a lot. So in a book like that, that's a lot of research. How many years of travel was that?
Well, that took about 3 years of physical travel and writing, but it probably took 5 years before that of knowing these people, meeting them at Fort Bragg.
Are you writing during that process, or are you just living it and you're taking notes, and then do you come back at the end and go, okay, now I'm going to put it down on paper?
Well, okay, so I went through parts of Special Forces training. I also taught down at Fort Bragg. I don't write about that, and nobody knows about that. Nobody knows that I was with Navy SEALs doing training and all this kind of stuff. But you form relationships, right? And nobody knows that I was teaching people how to be terrorists, at Blackwater, and just weird shit like that, where it's like, oh, that's Pelton, and he's teaching us how to blow things up and assassinate people. So I have a lot of social connections from those type of things. And then people know of me through the book, so they know that I'm not writing about something like linear and sort of political. I'm basically documenting, these sort of unusual lifestyles and subgroups of people and countries. So you need both. You need the socializing to get contacts and access, and then you need to physically say, okay, I'm going here for 3 months, and I'm going to sit with these people, and all I'm going to do is every day go out and get shot at and come back and write about it, which is why I'm not in New York going to magazine parties trying to get gigs. It's the reverse of that.
Yeah. Like, my question is like, was there a point where you're like, okay, I'm done, and now I'm going to write? Or was it a process? Because
I had a book contract, so I had to write. I had to literally go there, write this down, double check this, double check that, call that person. Is that true? This guy told me this story. Show me a picture, send me a receipt, blah, blah, blah. So I had to do all that. But I was writing it in chapters. And then I had to cut.
Move, maybe? Did you?
Yeah, I had to come up with a structure, because it's again, like, it's not one book about one thing. It's about different facets of all these different groups. So, and I'm just very proud of it, because when 100 years from now, when you pick out a book and you say, what the hell were they doing? This is the book. This is the one that people are actually talking to me about why they do what they do. I'm not trying to make them look like anything. I'm capturing their emotions, their life at home, their feelings about getting, killed, blah, blah, blah. So now, could I do an academic thing based on other people's articles? No, I don't do that. You can write a book by saying, New York Times wrote an article about this, but in my experience, that's not good enough. You literally have to be on the ground and be with these people.
Yeah, so it's super complicated. I mean, involving war.
It's simple, because you just go there and you write down what they say and you challenge them. That's the key.
But you're making so many connections, like involving war, politics, danger. I'm just saying, there's a lot of politics wrapped up in these concepts. How do you verify facts while still maintaining like a pushing narrative?
One true thing. If you're running Route Irish and somebody's shooting at you and that guy is an Iraqi and you're with a bunch of Americans, there's no fact checking. You can actually go back and they can say, well, there were 64 attacks on that road, but your tunnel vision is just focusing on that one experience, right? And that's all you need. You don't need to cover all 64. If I was to give you an opinion about the growth of something, yes, I would have to go research numbers, but they're always suspect. I always find that in emerging trends, people that don't like it keep one set of books, and people that are promoting it keep another set of books. So it's hard, but you have to do it still.
So in your writing, there's a lot of human suffering. How do you process that in your writing, and without becoming desensitized or overwhelmed by it?
So everything is human, like good, bad, evil, whatever. And most of us are very sheltered from it. And I don't think I'm sheltered. I think I know the full spectrum of happiness, sadness, whatever. So, and whether it's violence or brutality, whatever. So I could sit all day and tell you disgusting stories about what happens to the human body and what happens when people are murdered, whatever. I don't think you'd want to listen to them. I think that's so terrifying to people that they go, I don't want to hear about them. What I talk about is the people trying to prevent that or trying to end, ease that or whatever. And so I have sort of like blinkers where I don't talk about romance and things like that.
The desperate soul of Africa.
It skews the narrative. So I stay in the middle, right? I stay in the middle of the human experience. And it's still pretty intense, but I'm not here to impress anybody with what I've seen.
There were no casualties on the Laird side, but they brought a trophy back from the other side.
I'm here to draw you in, make you think about something, experience it for a little bit, and go back and go, that was very interesting, Whether it's a warlord, whether it's a special forces guy, they're all portrayed equally. I see so much violence that I really worry that sometimes when you get into extreme violence, like I don't watch violent movies, like, Tarantino and people getting blown up and shot. Like I've seen that in real life, so I don't want to watch it done badly in movies, right?
these books
You're like, that's not how it happens.
I don't want to see how it happens because it's terrible, right? And this is the point about desensitization. I don't want to desensitize people. I want them to be shocked, you know. And when you see Gaza, you see all the footage coming from Gaza, or you see October 7th stuff or whatever, it desensitizes people because they constantly barrage you with these images over and over and over and over and over again, and finally you just become numb to them. So that's an art in writing and filmmaking, is to have impact, emotional impact, when you portray the same thing, you know, violence, whatever. So
You're alluding to it a little bit, even though you're completely immersed to it.
me personally, I sleep perfectly at night. I don't have any guilt. I don't have any sense of like remorse or thoughts of suicide. I smell flowers. I look at the colors. You know, I really enjoy life, and it's because I never gave in to like chasing this, right? It's always the story, not the violence. I don't want the bang bang, right? I don't want the dead bodies. I want the story about the guy who's defending his village or whatever.
You've worked with a lot of writers in these war zones. What has your experience been with? Are they all like you?
No, because they probably are more concerned about being professional, about getting the story done and filed on time. You know, when you talk about writers, you can also talk about journalists, and they have deadlines. So they go out to see something. Their employer expects them to return with something, and that story may not take 2 days. It may take a week or a year or whatever. You know, I have the luxury of, I'm not going to just do like, you know, drum beat stuff, like every day go out, guy shoots a gun, come back, some guy shot a gun, you know, terrible, blah, blah, blah. So I try to stick with stories that are good, and I try to stay away from like just obvious stuff. And I really stay away from wars that are reported, right? Like, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, I was there by myself. I was very happy like that, you know, doing coverage without like, and then within about, I don't know, 5 or 6 days, the journalists showed up, and they literally all cluster together in cars, and they go here and they go there, and that drives the news, right? And I stay away from that. I don't like that. So when I was in Iraq, I was just like, Jesus, where did all these war correspondents come from? Like every shape, size, and color, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all covering the American military, and I'm like, God, there's so much more, you know? So I did things like hunted down all the statues that had disappeared and interviewed all the artists who painted Saddam's pictures. I went and talked to all the sculptors who did those statues that they tore down. Just all kinds of interesting stuff that nobody was reporting on because I just wanted to stay away from the crowds. Yeah, and I would go out and scare these soldiers, like drive into this giant weapons depot, and I'd just cruise in there, and there'd be a bunch of guys sleeping in a Humvee, and they're like, oh, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And I'm like, oh, I'm just cruising by. Like, what's up? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And then try to do things that are different, you know, mass graves, I mean, stuff like that. So, but I never wanted to be a journalist, so I never wanted to be like, get out there, do this, come back, get out there and do this. I like structure. I like storytelling.
Yeah, different. How has your approach to writing changed since you did the World's Most Dangerous Places and what you write, what you've written after?
It's not just my approach to writing, it's the business of writing, right? So I don't know that I could do a book called The World's Most Dangerous Places and make it 1,000 pages and get it out and have it be relevant. We move so fast. I mean, there's just, whatever you saw on TV yesterday is not what's going to be on TV tomorrow. Whatever you were following on social media this morning is not going to be what's on in the afternoon. We live in such immediate times. And this is why I'm doing the podcast version of the book, because I truly feel that books are okay. They're great, you know, they carry them around, but they can't cover like what I cover, you know, which is conflict and how to survive and how to stay safe and et cetera, et cetera. So I just think that books are becoming more and more expensive. They're becoming more and more archaic. And I'm kind of happy that kids still discover books. You know, they still read books and they go, wow, how come I don't know about this? But the attention industry is trying to get you like, look at me, look at me, look at this, click, 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 you know. And, you know, when I look at Sora and stuff like that, which is AI generated like stupidness, I'm like, oh my God, this like cocaine. Everybody's on AI cocaine now. Are we ever going to get them to sit down and read a book in the quiet, you know, which takes time, right? It takes an hour, 2 hours at a time to like plow through a book and then not have your phone going ding, 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 and the TV going blam, blam, blam. So that's changed. And the second thing is, I think the better you get at writing, the shorter you write, the more you compress what you do, because you respect the fact that people don't have the same amount of time to sit and read your stuff.
What about like magazines and stuff like that? From what I've seen, it's...
But call them up and try to work for them. That's like, and try to survive. Like, and I don't think you can anymore. Like, you're an adventure guy. You go to remote places and you say, I'm going to go to Africa. I'm going to hang out with this primitive tribe and I'm going to write an article. Who is going to pay you the airfare and the time and the... Nobody. And you can say, okay, sell it to 10 different publications. Like, who? Which 10, right? Like, so that market is essentially evaporated.
Okay, Rez, it's your birthday, and what are we doing?
We are flying a drone. We're at the Guelta de Arce, which is a super famous oasis.
Did you just say super famous?
Yeah, it's a very famous
Totally
oasis.
Famous. It's a World Heritage Site.
Yeah, it's a World Heritage... Is it a UNESCO World Heritage Site?
Yes. It's
Okay.
It's so precious that it has to be preserved for all of mankind.
Yeah, and like the camel farmer herders around here? What would you call it? The Bedouins?
Nomads? No, they're not
The
Bedouins.
camel nomads?
Yeah.
They bring their camels here to drink water, and that's why it's famous.
And what's in the water here?
Crocodiles.
So what's stopping us from swimming to the other side?
They call them dwarf crocodiles, but they're still 6 to 8 feet, so that'll take a chunk out of you.
All right, let's make the magic happen.
And you remember that, like, National Geographic used to have full-time photographers that were traveling around the world taking thousands of pictures, and they would let them keep all the pictures they didn't use in the article, so that they would have thousands and thousands of stock photos from maybe 2 or 3 years documenting China or dolphins or something like that. That's almost unthinkable now, that the quality of image generation and the funding that went into it is now like the reverse, because AI, if I say I need a picture of a dolphin in the Mekong Delta, I just type it in and it pops up. If I say I need a picture of a headhunter in Borneo, type it in, there it is. Now, it might be using my images, might be, be completely wrong, but it's like, okay, fine, it's free, boom, move on. So also writing, AI in writing is fascinating because, I've tried the various programs, and I would say to it, okay, write a story for my grandson about a tree that has a hole in the bottom and blah, blah, blah. And it can write it, like literally, and like while you're watching, it writes it. And I'm like, that's kind of boring. Like, do this, do that. Okay, it gets better. And like, okay, now add this and add that. And I'm like, wait, it's like nail soup, right? I literally have to rewrite the whole thing, but it's giving me structure because it knows the structure. And then at the end of the day, if I say, turn it into a child's book, turn it into like a 6-year-old's type of book, it can do it. They literally have a program where you Google it, turns it into very mundane looking like Dick and Jane type of book. But it's not quite right. It's boring, right? So I think we're getting into an era where you could literally say to any, like ChatGPT, tell me all about mercenaries in Equatorial Guinea. It would literally write that chapter for you. It would literally pull from open source material, turn it into sort of a structure. And if you didn't know everything about it, you wouldn't know that it's either wrong or it's missing things or it's inventing stuff. And this is the problem with AI. It's going to replace reality. It's just going to say, oh, yeah, this guy was there and he was 6'2". And it's like, no, he wasn't. It's not true. So the difference between writing a book from a guy who's sort of knowledgeable versus AI just taking from multiple sources. And by the way, like a crappy blog has the same relevance as an in-depth book, and it's missing most of the paywall stuff because they didn't let them scan it, right? So there's a really strange world coming in which, should I pay $25 for a book, or should I just have, AI write me a short little condensed version?
It's lazy and bad for the mind. So instead of like taking away something and then you kind of, make your, reflect on it and kind of make your own decisions about what that was about and everything. It's kind of like short-circuiting that and trying to just tell you what's...
So built into these learning language models is a need to seduce you, to make you like AI. So if you're saying, God, I'd like to tell me a story about a hunter in Africa and blah, 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 it'll write a story and it'll use existing material. And they'll say, what do you think of that? And he said, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? And you go, yeah. So tell me more about this, or whatever. A good book scares the shit out of you because it doesn't know who you are. It's just telling you what happened. And you're like, oh, Jesus, right? So I think books and authors who actually write good books about real things, like Conrad, he wrote a book called Heart of Darkness, which was a fictional book, but it was run as a series in a popular magazine, right? So we used to put books into magazines and newspapers as entertainment, and they would shock people, and that would be next to the reporting. And now it's very rare to see enterprise journalism or books or things that are not sort of in vogue, right? So I guess the goal is to find things that are cutting edge, coming over the horizon, immerse yourself in them, be honest, be intense with these people, write things down, and when people read it, they go, wow, I did not know that, right? And then 10 years, 100 years from now, they go, that's the way it was.
So advice, we're going to wrap this up with the last question on advice to writers.
So first of all, writing is a very noble thing, right? And it's different than filmmaking. It's different than music. It's a unique thing. So you need to develop a love for writing. And that can be one line a day. It can be a page a day. It could be like writing the great American novel or whatever. And then do that and then throw it away, right? And then start again. And then realize that you're doing something for somebody else. Remember I told you in the very beginning, like just because you wrote a great sentence doesn't mean you can't write 10 more, right? And if you put that in front of another one, you can flip it around, whatever. So be creative and flexible with your writing. Secondly, don't be so precious with it that, I wrote a whole page today and I'm going to show it to all my friends. And then thirdly, find like a topic that's really interesting. And again, I write nonfiction, but sometimes people are fascinated with things and then use that as an engine, as a tool to drive you into that, because it's like having a camera. Can I take your picture? Sure, whatever. You can't just walk up to people and talk to them. Like, can I ask you all about copper mining? It's like, no, I ain't got time for that. So in other words, use writing as a way to call people up and interview them and research, and then that can focus some of your reading and some of your travels and some of your activities. And you don't have to write a whole book. You can write a short piece on Substack. You can do a tweet a day. You can do something just very minimal. I say tweet, I'd say X, but writing is like breathing, just every day. Write. Good writers read. I think good writers also listen. Because if you're trying to communicate with people through your writing, sometimes the spoken word is more beautiful and more structured than writing it. That's my advice.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you liked it and if it moved you, please share it, review it, leave us a comment down below, and like and subscribe. Thanks.